Submitting a tender bid to the province of Prince Edward Island, an introduction to bidding. This publication summarizes the steps involved in goods procurement in the province of Prince Edward Island, and although it describes the processes involved, it is not all-inclusive. Vendors should also recognize that this publication is a reference document and is not intended to be a replacement for the PEI Procurement of Goods Act and regulations. It is intended to be used by suppliers for guideline purposes only. In the event of any conflict between the advice given in this publication and the Procurement of Goods Act and Regulations, the Act and Regulations shall prevail. Where does the province of Prince Edward Island advertise tenders? The province advertises and distributes tenders for goods and services using its own website. This is an internet-based system, and all suppliers with access to the internet may view and download tender information for free. All Prince Edward Island government tenders will be advertised on this system. Tender postings. Each tender visible on the tender's webpage has a unique solicitation number, a brief description, a publish date and a closing date, a tendering organization, and a tender category. Each individual tender posting includes additional information below its identifying solicitation number, including the tender type, the agreement type, the estimated value, the procurement services contact, the organization contact, and the tender package. This is an example of a tender package. The tender package must be completed and signed by an authorized individual prior to submission. Tender specifications. Each tender has its own general specifications, and the supplier is obligated to meet the requirements of those specifications. An addendum is added to a tender posting to notify all suppliers of any changes in tender specifications. You are advised to carefully review the tender posting and your completed tender documents before submitting them to ensure the specifications and compliance requirements are addressed. Submitting your bid. All tender submissions must meet the following conditions. All bidders must comply with the Atlantic Province's standard terms and conditions. Procurement services must receive your complete tender package no later than the date specified in the tender document. A delay for any reason, including transport, customs, courier, fax availability, or email transfer, will not be considered. Tenders will be time and date stamped to show the time and date received and placed in a locked repository until the date of tender closing. Submitting your bid. Tender documents should be authorized with the signature of the authorized official of the tendering firm. Complete. All required and related documents must be included. Labeled. Clearly display the tender solicitation number and the tender closing date. Legible. Typed or hand-printed carefully and clearly. Select one of the following to submit tender documents to procurement services: email, hand delivery, fax, or mail. Please note that due to current COVID-19 restrictions, the only way to submit a tender bid is through the procurement services at gov.pe.ca email. After submitting a bid, tender packages will be time and date stamped to show the hour and date received and placed in a locked repository until the date of tender closing. Tender documents received after the stated deadline will not be accepted. Once tenders are opened, they are evaluated for compliance and unqualified tenders will be rejected. Procurement services may contact a bidder or vendor for clarification. Documents may be forwarded to originating departments for review. Items in a tender may be considered separately and may be distributed to more than one bidder. Changing information on a tender document. A submitted tender may be amended at any time prior to the date and time of closing. The individual authorizing the original tender must submit a written amendment labeled Amendment and stating the tender number. The amendment document should clearly show the revised bid price of a unit price contract, amount to be added or subtracted from the original tender price in a lump sum tender, or information that is missing from the original tender submission. Withdrawing a tender. Any tender may be withdrawn at any time prior to closing, but cannot be withdrawn, altered, or changed in any way after the tender closing date and time. The individual who signed the original tender must request the withdrawal in writing, clearly indicating the tender to be withdrawn. Evaluation of tender packages. Once tenders are open, they are reviewed for compliance. Tenders which do not qualify will be rejected with an explanation. During tender evaluations and prior to awarding a tender, Procurement Services reserves the right to consult with any vendor for clarification without prejudice to any award or decision not to award. A number of factors may be considered in the selection. Each item in a tender may be considered separately, and all or any part of the tender may be accepted or rejected. In doing so, the tender may be distributed to more than one vendor. Although price is an important element and a tender is generally awarded to the bidder who can supply the goods at the lowest total cost, other factors may be considered, such as past performance of a supplier, quality, delivery time, operation costs, training costs, and after-sales service. Tender documents may be returned to the originating department or jurisdiction in the case of a joint tender issued on behalf of the Atlantic provinces for their review and recommendations. Announcing an awarded tender. Once tenders are awarded, winning bidders are posted on the tender's webpage. For reference purposes, public tenders remain available online after they close. Unsuccessful bids. You may request a debriefing information session after a tender is awarded. You must submit a written request to the procurement contact within 60 days of the notification of the outcome of the procurement process. The intent of a debriefing session is to assist you in presenting a better proposal in future procurement opportunities. It is not an opportunity to challenge the procurement process or its outcome. Any questions, comments, or concerns may be directed to our Procurement Services team at the below found information.